Hi guys, Tony here from Tony Reviews. This week we are going to take a look at fitting new brake pads to the front and rear of the Transit MK8. So my van is a Transit MK8 2017 model. It's a medium wheelbase and it is a single rear wheel axle. I've just got one of these dreaded MOT failures, which is the reason for this week's video and for the repair. Because unbeknownst to me, the brakes really weren't that bad. You know, the brakes always felt great in my van, and in a lot of these modern vehicles you've got sensors now which tell you when the pads are getting low, and no sensor warnings came up or anything like that. So to be fair, this MOT failure is a little bit of a shock. They have highlighted it is the rear pads that are below 1.5mm thick, so they need changing if that's the case. And they've also highlighted that the front pads are an advisory, so it's an all-round job. Now on my way back I've picked up a box of these. These are the ICHA brake pads for the Transit MK8. Also on the back it does say that they fit the Transit Tornio Custom. I got these for about 37 quid from Euro Car Parts, so 37 roughly for the front, 37 for the back. I have had to purchase a piston caliper winding tool because on the rears there are the calipers have got winding pistons that push out, so they come out, you know, in a winding motion rather than push it in and out as the fronts do. I'll take you through that. The kit that I bought is a multi sort of universal kit, and that was about 30 quid from Screwfix, good old Screwfix. So I'll take you through the tools that you need, the job that's sort of required. Again, on the backs and the fronts, sorry, not the backs and the fronts, again on the rears, on the left and the right, the pistons wind in different directions, and I'll show you which side winds which way. So let's get to the job, let's get to it. So as I'm using a manual jack and axle stands, I'm breaking the biggest part of the tension on the wheel nuts first before I jack it up. Release the pressure by unscrewing the cap on the reservoir and jack it up in the designated jacking point, which is just under this big bolt here on the wishbone. As an extra precaution, I like to put the front wheel or the wheel under the van as another little thing in case it does drop. Now these bolts are really tight, so I'm using a rubber mallet and keeping the tension on the spanner, and I'm using a rubber mallet to just break this seal. These are 15mm spanners on these two retaining bolts for the calipers. Once you get it moving, you are going to need a wrench to secure the locking nut that I'm holding here. So the caliper might still be a little bit tough to come off. So what you might need to do is try and compress those pistons by pulling it against the disc, just to give you a little wiggle room to wiggle it off. The pad should just slide out quite simply. On one side of my van I had a sensor, a wear sensor. What I'm doing is lining up the old pads with new, putting on the new sensor, and just check what way round it goes with against your old one. I'm giving the calipers a good old clean with some brake cleaner and a brush. Give everything a good clean with some brake cleaner, good old brush, make sure everything's nice and clean. And again, the pistons as well within the caliper as well. I'm using this red rubber grease, which is specifically for brakes, and these pistons have got like a rubber boot around the pistons themselves, which keeps the gunk and the dirt from getting in and keeps the pistons nice and clean. So this rubber grease is just going to help that rubber stay more lubricated and ease those pistons in and out. I'm using the old brake pad with a couple of clamps on both pistons, because it's a double pot piston, to push those pistons back evenly back into the housing. Just putting some of that grease on the tips where that slides in and out of the clips so it can slide freely, making sure not to get any on the bit discs themselves or the pads, and then just put some on the outside of the back of the pads as well, so that it stops any sort of squeaking or squealing from the calipers. Again, these rubber boots that sort of slide in and out, these rubber grommets, and on the back of both discs. Very, very thin layer. You don't want a lot. Now everything's put back together, it's time to get the caliper on, and it's just about doing everything in reverse. If you've got the sensor, remember what way it came off so that you can put it back. Again, doing these bolts up, you're going to need to hold that collar. So I'm going to put these bolts on and just do them slightly tight so there's no movement, but I'm not putting too much pressure until I release it from the jack, and then I can put the full pressure on getting the correct torque settings for the wheels on. Again, put the cap back on because you want to pressurise the system, start the van and give the pedal a good few pumps. So I hope you found this video helpful. What I'm actually going to do is put the rear calipers in a different video on its own. I'll put a link in this description as well, so that if you want to jump to the rear, you can do that. It just saves me the bother of having to timestamp this video, and also I've got to go through the footage and do it all anyway, so it's the same amount of time to do one video as it is two. Anyway, getting back to the pads. So the point of this video really was because the van had failed its MOT, and the company had told me that it had failed on the rears, that they were below the legal limit of 1.5 mil, but yet the fronts were also on an advisory. At the time, you know, when they phoned me, which I'd been sat in a McDonald's around the corner for just over an hour, they phoned me to say the van's failed, which I was shocked at, and you know, said it needed new pads at the back and that the fronts were on an advisory. And I was just about ready to say, do you know what, do the job, because I thought, oh God, can I really be bothered to spend the weekend, you know, covered in filth and jacking the van up and all that business? Like, do I really want to be bothering with that? I was just about to say do it when he said, unfortunately we can't fit you in till Tuesday. So I said, oh, don't worry, and that's when I made my mind up. All right, I'll do it. And he was quick then to say, oh, you're going to do it? Well, the fronts are not, you know, you don't need to bother really with the fronts, they're just an advisory. But I thought, well, it's an advisory, so if you're going to do it, you might as well, you know, if I'm going to get dirty, I might as well do it all in one go, which is why I bought all the parts. Now, this is where we get to the point. When I stripped them all off, this was the level of the brake pads on all four pads at the front, and when I measured them, they are 9 mil thick. Now this is a new pad, okay, and that is 12 mil thick, brand new, right, ready to go on, brand new. So the wear on the actual existing pads at 9 mil was only 70%, was 70% still good. you know, they still had 70% wear left in them before they were going to be upon the illegal limit. And it's just one of them things. I think I'm glad that I've actually done the job myself now, because if I hadn't, I was ready to tell them guys at the garage, you know what, I'll just do it, because I couldn't be bothered, because I didn't want the hassle. But I think it's one of them things that, you know, it's probably the way a lot of garages operate. Rather than get one job done, unfortunately, this is where the thing comes in of, you know, mistrust in mechanics and whatever. You know, telling you that you need all your brake pads doing. So if you can do the job, do the job. Like I said, it's cost me 37 quid for the fronts and 37 for the rears. Again, when I've done the job, at least you know you've done the job properly. You know, stripping out and cleaning all the calipers and the pistons and greasing all the rubber parts. Whereas I don't know whether or not they would take the length to do that. I think they'd just probably, not that I can speak for all garages, but you know, a lot of the time, strip it off, fling them on, bolt it back up, done. So at least you know when you've done it yourself, you've taken the time, care and attention, and you've done the job properly. I think if I was to do the job again, I would not potentially buy the bottom of the range parts from Euro Car Parts. I would get a slightly higher quality brake pad. And that's just because these ones didn't come, for the fronts, they didn't come with new retaining clips, and so my clips were a little bit bent, you know, old, needed a lot of cleaning. That would have saved a bit of time, and also it didn't come with new bolts, so it still had the old 15mm bolts that I had to reuse. Bearing in mind most of the work is done by the rears, and when you get the rear kit, it does come, these ITRA parts do come with new retaining clips for the rear and new Loctited, like pre-Loctited bolts for the rear calipers as well. But I'll take you through that on the other video. In the meantime, if you haven't yet checked out the Let Us Live website, go to www.letuslive.co.uk. It is a website that is inspired by motorcycles and everything adventure, and if you put Tony Reviews in the checkout, you get a little discount there as well. So all that's left for me to say is safe riding, safe driving. When it stops raining, hopefully you're going to get out there. Happy adventures, and I'll see you all in the next one.